There are clocks that tell the hour. There are clocks that remind us when morning arrives, or when evening gently fades into night. But somewhere, far beyond the busiest cities, beyond quiet valleys, and beyond the tallest mountains, stands a little workshop where no clock has ever hurried anyone. Its hands move softly. Its bells ring only when the stars are listening. And every evening, just before the moon climbs above the rooftops, an old clockmaker begins collecting something far more precious than minutes. He collects moonlight, not to keep it, but to gently return it to the night whenever the world grows a little too busy to notice its beauty. Tonight, the little workshop has left one window open, and the warm glow inside is waiting for you. Welcome. I'm glad you found your way here tonight. Before we step into our story, allow yourself a quiet moment to settle. Perhaps your pillow has already become wonderfully comfortable. Perhaps your blanket feels just a little warmer than it did a few moments ago. Whatever today has brought, you don't have to carry all of it into the night. Imagine that every thought you've been holding, every task, every conversation, every little worry is like a tiny pocket watch resting gently in your hands. One by one, place those watches upon a smooth wooden shelf. They'll still be there tomorrow, tonight. They don't need to keep ticking. Notice your breathing. There is no need to make it slower, no need to change it at all. Simply allow each breath to arrive and leave, like gentle waves reaching a quiet shore. Outside, the stars have already begun appearing. The moon is slowly climbing into the evening sky, and in a small workshop hidden among peaceful hills, a clockmaker has just lit a single lantern. Its warm golden light spills onto the cobblestone street. The old wooden door creaks open. A cool evening breeze carries the scent of cedar, fresh bread, and blooming jasmine. The clockmaker smiles, as though he has been expecting you all along. So take one slow, comfortable breath, and another. The clocks have become wonderfully quiet. Our story begins now. In a quiet valley, where the evenings always seemed just a little longer, stood a small stone workshop. Its roof was covered with soft green moss. Its windows glowed with warm amber light every night of the year. Wild lavender grew beside the front path. A tiny stream wandered lazily behind the building, and above the doorway hung a simple wooden sign. It read only 3 words: Clockmaker Elias. No one remembered exactly how long the workshop had been there. Some believed it had always belonged to the valley. Others whispered that it appeared only after the last bell of sunset. Children imagined that the workshop quietly folded itself into the hills before dawn, only to return each evening with the first star. No one could say for certain. The workshop never seemed concerned with being understood. Inside, hundreds of clocks rested upon shelves of polished oak, tall grandfather clocks, tiny travel clocks, round brass clocks, wooden clocks carved with flowers and birds. Some were older than the oldest trees. Others looked as though they had been finished only yesterday. Yet something unusual filled the room. Although every clock was working perfectly, none of them ticked loudly. Instead, their gentle rhythms blended together like soft rain upon distant rooftops. Tick, pause, tick, pause. A peaceful chorus, not measuring time, simply keeping company with it. The old clockmaker moved quietly among them. His name was Elias. His silver hair curled gently beneath a faded blue cap. Round spectacles rested low upon his nose. His hands were steady, not because they were young, but because they had learned that careful work always begins with patience. Each evening, before he touched a single clock, he opened every window. Fresh night air drifted through the workshop, carrying the scent of pine trees, cool stone, and blooming jasmine. Then he lit one small lantern. Its warm golden glow settled gently across the wooden floor. Only after the room welcomed the evening did Elias begin his work. He listened to each clock, one at a time, not searching for mistakes, simply asking, "How has your day been?" Some clocks answered with cheerful little ticks. Others sounded sleepy. A few seemed thoughtful. Elias smiled at each one. He believed that even clocks appreciated being noticed. When the moon finally rose above the hills, the old clockmaker reached for something very unusual. A small crystal bottle, no taller than his hand, perfectly clear. It looked empty. Yet as soon as moonlight touched the glass, tiny silver threads began drifting into it, one by one. Like mist finding its way home, Elias watched with quiet satisfaction.
"There you are," he whispered.
Right on time. The bottle slowly filled with shimmering moonlight. Not enough to brighten the room, only enough to make it feel wonderfully peaceful. He carefully placed the bottle upon a shelf beside dozens of others. Some held the pale silver light of winter moons. Others glowed softly with the golden moonlight of warm summer evenings. Each bottle carried the quiet memory of a different night. Each one was precious. A gentle knock sounded at the workshop door. 3 slow taps. Tap, tap, tap. Elias smiled before opening it. Standing outside was a young traveler wearing a deep green cloak. A small leather satchel rested over one shoulder. Their boots carried the fine dust of many winding roads. Their eyes held the kind curiosity that only long journeys seem to bring. "Good evening," the traveler said softly. "I've heard there's a clockmaker here who can repair almost anything." Elias smiled warmly. "I can certainly try." The traveler stepped inside. Their gaze wandered across the quiet workshop. So many clocks. The old clockmaker nodded, each keeping a different story. The traveler reached into the satchel and carefully removed a small pocket watch. Its silver case was beautifully engraved with tiny crescent moons. "It still keeps perfect time," the traveler explained. They hesitated. "It no longer reminds me to notice beautiful moments." Elias looked thoughtfully at the little watch. Then he smiled. I don't think it's broken." The traveler blinked. "No?" The old clockmaker gently held the pocket watch beneath the lantern's warm glow. "No." He looked toward the shelf of crystal bottles quietly gathering moonlight. "I believe it's simply forgotten how to listen." Outside, the moon climbed a little higher. The stars gathered patiently overhead, and somewhere inside that little silver pocket watch, the faintest shimmer of moonlight stirred, as though it too had been waiting for someone to notice. The little silver pocket watch rested quietly upon Elias's workbench. Moonlight spilled gently through the open window. Its pale glow settled across the polished wood like silk. The old clockmaker adjusted his spectacles, not because he needed to see more clearly, because careful work always deserved a careful beginning. The young traveler watched patiently. "I've taken it to many clockmakers," they said softly. "They all told me it was working perfectly." Elias nodded. "I believe them." He picked up the watch with both hands. Its silver case was cool against his fingertips. The tiny crescent moons engraved upon its surface had become smooth with age. Many years of gentle hands had polished them into quiet brightness. The clockmaker listened, not to the ticking, to the silence between the ticks. Tick, pause, tick, pause. He smiled. "There it is." The traveler leaned forward. "What did you hear?" Elias looked kindly at them. "Nothing." The traveler frowned slightly. "I don't understand." The old clockmaker chuckled. "Exactly." He opened the silver cover. Inside, the tiny gears turned beautifully. Every wheel moved with graceful precision. Each spring rested exactly where it belonged. The watch had not forgotten how to measure time. It had forgotten how to notice it. Elias closed the cover once more. "Come." He carried the pocket watch toward the largest window in the workshop. Outside, the valley rested beneath the moon. The stream behind the workshop reflected silver ribbons of light. Fireflies wandered lazily through the lavender. Far away, an owl greeted the evening with a single quiet call. The old clockmaker held the pocket watch toward the open sky. Nothing happened. At least, not at first. The moon continued climbing. The breeze drifted through the window, carrying the fragrance of cedar and wild jasmine. Then, a single thread of moonlight descended. It touched the watch for only a heartbeat. A tiny shimmer passed through the silver case, gone almost as quickly as it had appeared. The traveler blinked. "Did you see that?" Elias smiled. "I hoped you would." He placed the watch gently back upon the workbench. "It remembers the moon." The traveler looked puzzled. "Can a watch remember?" The old clockmaker laughed softly. "Oh, my friend, everything remembers. The trees remember every spring. The rivers remember every mountain they have crossed. The stars remember every traveler who has looked up in wonder." He gently tapped the watch with one finger. "And clocks remember every quiet moment they have faithfully witnessed." The room settled into peaceful silence once more. Hundreds of clocks continued their gentle chorus. Tick, pause, tick, pause. The traveler found themselves listening, really listening, for the first time in many years. The sound was strangely comforting, not hurried, not demanding, simply present. Elias walked toward a tall wooden cabinet standing in the corner of the workshop. Its doors were carved with tiny stars, tiny moons, tiny birds in flight. He opened it carefully. Inside rested dozens of crystal bottles, each filled with captured moonlight. Some shimmered with cool silver, others glowed with warm ivory light. One held the pale blue moonlight of winter, another sparkled with the soft golden glow of late summer. The traveler whispered, "They're beautiful." The old clockmaker nodded. "Each bottle remembers a different night." He selected one no larger than an apple. Its light was gentle, almost sleepy. "What night is that one from?" Elias smiled as though greeting an old friend. "The night when an elderly couple danced together beneath the harvest moon, even though neither could hear the music anymore." The traveler smiled. Another bottle shimmered with a brighter silver. "And that one, the evening a little girl wished upon the first star, not for herself, but for her grandfather to feel well again." The room seemed warmer somehow, not because of the lantern, because every bottle carried kindness inside its light. Elias carefully lifted another crystal bottle. Unlike the others, this one appeared almost empty. Only a tiny sparkle rested inside. The traveler looked curiously at it. "There's hardly any moonlight." The old clockmaker nodded. "There doesn't need to be." He carried it to the workbench. "This was collected on the quietest night I've ever known." He uncorked the bottle. A single silver thread floated into the air. It drifted lazily downward, then settled upon the little pocket watch. Immediately, the ticking changed. Not faster, not slower, softer, warmer, as though the watch had taken a long, comfortable breath. Tick, pause, tick, pause. The traveler listened carefully. "It sounds..." They searched for the right word. "Happy." Elias smiled. "No." He looked toward the moon beyond the window. "It sounds grateful." Outside, the clouds drifted slowly across the stars. The valley rested peacefully beneath the quiet sky. Then, from somewhere deep inside the little pocket watch, a tiny chime rang, just once, soft enough that it almost blended with the breeze. The traveler looked surprised. It never used to do that. The old clockmaker's eyes sparkled. It remembered something. What? Elias gently closed the watch and placed it in the traveler's hands. "I don't know, not yet." He smiled. "But tomorrow night, I think it's going to show us." The traveler looked down at the little watch. For the first time in many years, it no longer felt like something that measured passing hours. It felt like a companion, one quietly waiting to share a forgotten story. Outside, the moon climbed higher still. Its silver light rested upon the workshop roof. The crystal bottles shimmered peacefully upon their shelves. And somewhere beyond the quiet hills, another old clock had just begun. to remember. The workshop grew wonderfully still. Outside, the moon continued its slow journey above the quiet valley. Inside, hundreds of clocks kept their gentle rhythm. Tick, pause, tick, pause. The traveler held the little silver pocket watch close. It felt different now. Not heavier, not lighter, simply warmer, almost as though it had remembered the comfort of an old friend. Elias carefully returned the crystal bottle to its shelf. Its tiny thread of moonlight had completed its work. The bottle looked empty once more, yet somehow it seemed more beautiful than before. The traveler noticed. Why does it still glow? The old clockmaker smiled. Because generosity leaves something behind. He gently closed the cabinet doors. The moonlight has been given away, but kindness always leaves a little warmth. The traveler nodded thoughtfully. They liked that answer very much. For a while, they simply listened. The clocks breathed together. The lantern flickered softly. The breeze wandered through the open windows carrying the scent of pine needles and blooming lavender. Then, the little pocket watch chimed again. Only once, a quiet, clear, silver note. Elias looked toward the eastern window. Ah, I believe it's ready. The traveler blinked. Ready for what? The old clockmaker reached for his blue coat hanging beside the door. For a short walk, he smiled warmly. The nicest kind. Together, they stepped outside. The cool night air greeted them gently. Above, the stars shimmered like tiny lanterns scattered across velvet. The moon bathed the valley in soft silver light. Every blade of grass seemed to glow. The little stream behind the workshop sang quietly as it wandered over smooth stones. No hurry, no destination. Simply enjoying the journey. Elias followed the stream along a narrow footpath. The traveler walked beside him. The pocket watch rested quietly inside the traveler's hand. Every few moments, it gave the faintest little pulse of warmth, as though gently pointing the way. The path curved through a peaceful grove of cedar trees. Their branches whispered softly overhead. Owls watched silently from the higher limbs. Small rabbits paused among the ferns before continuing their quiet evening adventures. Everything felt wonderfully unhurried. Eventually, the trees opened. Before them stretched a meadow unlike any the traveler had ever seen. Thousands of flowers covered the gentle hills. Some shimmered pale blue, others glowed with soft gold. A few sparkled silver beneath the moon. Their petals never closed. No matter how late the hour became, the traveler stopped walking. "It's beautiful," Elias smiled. "This," he whispered, "is the garden of lost moments." The traveler looked around. "I've never heard of it. Very few people have." The old clockmaker stepped carefully into the meadow. Only those who learn to slow down ever find it. The flowers swayed gently, as though welcoming old friends. Tiny silver butterflies drifted lazily from blossom to blossom. They made no sound. Only soft trails of moonlight followed behind them. The traveler noticed something unusual. Every flower looked slightly different. Some blossoms resembled tiny stars. Others looked like little bells. One nearby unfolded in the shape of a smiling crescent moon. "What kind of flowers are these?" Elias knelt beside one glowing bloom. "They're moments." The traveler tilted their head. "Moments." The old clockmaker nodded. "Moments that people almost missed." He touched the flower gently. Immediately, a tiny picture appeared inside its glowing petals. A father lifting his laughing daughter high into the autumn leaves. The image lasted only a heartbeat. Then the flower returned to its peaceful glow. The traveler smiled. Another flower shimmered. Inside appeared an elderly woman quietly feeding birds at sunrise. Another. Two friends laughing beneath an umbrella during warm summer rain. Another. A little boy, carefully placing a blanket over his sleeping dog. Simple moments, ordinary moments, beautiful moments. So these are memories. the traveler whispered. Elias shook his head gently. Not exactly. They are moments that almost passed unnoticed. He looked across the endless garden. When someone pauses long enough to truly notice kindness, or beauty, or wonder, one of these flowers blooms. The traveler gazed across the meadow. There were thousands, perhaps millions, so many. The old clockmaker smiled. The world is much kinder than people sometimes remember. The little pocket watch gave another soft chime. This time, its silver cover slowly opened by itself. Inside, instead of tiny gears, the traveler briefly saw something impossible. A field of fireflies dancing beneath a summer sky. The image disappeared almost instantly. The gears returned. Tick, pause, tick, pause. The traveler looked at Elias. What was that? The old clockmaker's eyes twinkled. I believe your watch has begun remembering the moments it helped someone notice. They continued walking slowly through the glowing meadow. The flowers opened gently as they passed. One revealed a grandmother teaching her grandson how to bake bread. Another showed a young artist quietly painting the first light of morning. Another held the memory of two strangers sharing the last seat on a train with warm smiles instead of hurried silence. The traveler felt something changing inside. Not excitement, not surprise. Something quieter, a growing appreciation. For small things, the moon climbed a little higher. The silver butterflies drifted upward into the night sky. The flowers glowed more warmly. Then, far across the meadow, a single blossom shone brighter than all the others. Its petals were pure white. Its center glowed with soft golden light. The little pocket watch chimed. Once, twice. 3 gentle notes. Elias smiled. I thought we might find it. The traveler looked toward the luminous flower. What is it? The old clockmaker's voice became almost a whisper. That, he said, is a moment that hasn't happened yet. The breeze became wonderfully still. The flower continued glowing quietly in the moonlight, as though patiently waiting for someone to arrive exactly when they were meant to. The white flower glowed softly beneath the moon. Its petals shimmered like freshly fallen snow. At its center, a warm golden light rested peacefully, not bright, not dazzling, simply calm. The traveler stood quietly beside it. The little pocket watch gave one gentle tick, then became wonderfully still. Not because it had stopped, because it was listening. Elias smiled. It has found what it was hoping to hear. The traveler looked at the flower. It hasn't bloomed yet? The old clockmaker shook his head. Oh, it has bloomed. He smiled warmly. It simply belongs to tomorrow. The traveler frowned thoughtfully. I don't understand. Elias knelt beside the flower. He rested one hand upon the cool grass. Most flowers remember beautiful moments that have already happened. He looked up at the glowing blossom. But every so often, the garden grows a flower for a beautiful moment that is still on its way. The breeze stirred gently through the meadow. Silver butterflies drifted around the flower without landing, as though they, too, understood that some moments should never be hurried. The traveler leaned closer. Inside the golden center, something began to appear. Not a clear picture, only gentle shapes. A wooden bench beneath an old oak tree, morning sunlight filtering through green leaves. 2 steaming cups resting side by side. The image shimmered softly, then faded. What does it mean? The traveler whispered. Elias smiled. It means somewhere, someone will soon choose to slow down. He looked across the quiet meadow, and because of that choice, this flower has already begun blooming. The traveler remained silent. They liked the thought that kindness could arrive before anyone expected it. They continued walking through the garden of lost moments. The path curved gently between glowing blossoms. Every flower seemed to carry its own quiet story. One revealed a little girl pausing to rescue a ladybug from a puddle after the rain. Another showed an elderly baker leaving fresh bread on a neighbor's doorstep before sunrise. A pale blue blossom held the image of a musician stopping in the middle of a busy street to play a gentle melody for a child who had begun to cry. Each memory lasted only a heartbeat, yet each left behind a feeling of quiet warmth. The traveler noticed something curious. None of the moments were grand. There were no kings, no castles, no great adventures, only ordinary people, living ordinary days, filled with extraordinary kindness. They smiled. I thought beautiful moments had to be big. Elias chuckled softly. The moon doesn't fill the night all at once. It simply shines, little by little. The traveler looked up. The moon hung peacefully above the valley. Its silver light touched every flower equally. The largest blossoms, the smallest buds, the old trees, the winding stream. Nothing was overlooked. The little pocket watch suddenly opened again. This time, the traveler saw another memory. A child sitting on a windowsill during a rainstorm, watching tiny drops race down the glass. The child smiled, not because anything exciting was happening, because someone had quietly sat beside them. Together, they watched the rain. Nothing more, nothing less. The image disappeared. The watch closed gently. Tick, pause. Tick, pause. The traveler felt an unexpected lump in their throat. I remember doing that. Elias looked at them kindly. Perhaps your watch remembered before you did. They walked a little farther until they reached the edge of the meadow. There, the flowers gradually became fewer. The grass gave way to smooth white stones. Beyond the stones lay a perfectly still pond. Its surface reflected every star above, so clearly that it became impossible to tell where the sky ended and the water began. There was not a single ripple, not even the breeze disturbed it. At the center of the pond rested one tiny wooden boat, no larger than a park bench. It drifted without moving, waiting. The traveler looked toward Elias. Where does it go? The old clockmaker smiled. It doesn't travel across the water. He looked into the reflection of the stars. It travels through quiet. The traveler blinked. Through quiet? Elias nodded. Some places cannot be reached by walking. They can only be reached after the mind has become wonderfully still. The little pocket watch chimed once more. A gentle silver note floated across the pond. The tiny boat slowly turned toward the shore, without anyone touching it. Without making the slightest sound, it drifted closer until it rested gently against the white stones. The old clockmaker stepped aboard first, then offered his hand to the traveler. The little pocket watch rested peacefully in the traveler's palm. Its ticking had become softer than ever, almost impossible to hear, not because it was fading, because it no longer needed to remind anyone to hurry. The boat slipped quietly away from the shore. The pond remained perfectly smooth behind them. No wake, no ripples, only silence. Above, the stars reflected below. Below, the stars reflected above. And somewhere in that endless mirror of sky and water, the traveler began to feel as though time itself had quietly stepped aside, making room for something far more precious: peace. The little wooden boat glided across the quiet lake. It moved without oars, without sails, without even the smallest ripple beneath its hull. The water welcomed it, as though it had been making this same peaceful journey for countless ages. The traveler sat quietly near the bow. The silver pocket watch rested comfortably in their hands. Its gentle ticking had become so soft that it blended with their own breathing. Tick, breathe, tick, breathe. Elias sat opposite, his weathered blue coat fluttering only slightly in the cool evening breeze. Neither spoke. There was no need. The silence itself had become part of the story. Above them, the heavens stretched farther than imagination. Thousands upon thousands of stars shimmered softly, each reflected perfectly upon the lake below. Soon, the traveler could no longer tell which stars belonged to the sky and which belonged to the water. It seemed as though the boat floated between two peaceful nights, one above, one below. The traveler smiled. "It feels like we're sailing through the stars." Elias looked upward, then downward. He smiled too. "Perhaps the stars are sailing with us." The boat drifted onward. Every so often, a tiny silver fish leaped gracefully from the water. Instead of splashing, it left behind a small circle of glowing light. The circles expanded gently, then faded, as though the lake preferred whispers to waves. The traveler watched one of the circles disappear. "It's so quiet," the old clockmaker nodded. "This lake has never learned how to hurry." A gentle breeze carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine across the water. Somewhere far away, a nightingale sang a single, peaceful note, then returned to silence. The traveler closed their eyes for a moment. The boat rocked almost imperceptibly. It felt less like movement and more like being gently cradled. When they opened their eyes again, they noticed something extraordinary. Several stars had descended from the sky, not falling, simply drifting downward with quiet grace. One by one, they came to rest upon the surface of the lake. Each became a tiny floating lantern. Their reflections shimmered beneath them like ribbons of silver silk. The traveler whispered, "They've come closer." Elias nodded. "They visit every peaceful night." "Why?" The old clockmaker smiled. "Even stars enjoy resting." The traveler laughed softly. It was the kind of laughter that asked for nothing more than another quiet moment. The floating stars drifted lazily beside the boat. One settled close enough for the traveler to see inside its gentle glow. Within the little star lantern appeared a brief memory, a mother quietly brushing her daughter's hair before bed. Neither spoke, neither needed to. The tenderness of the moment filled the tiny lantern. Then the image dissolved back into soft silver light. Another floating star revealed an old man sitting beneath an apple tree, reading a weathered book while his dog slept peacefully beside him. Another held the image of a family watching snow fall from their front porch, wrapped together beneath one large blanket. Simple evenings, quiet joys, moments that asked for nothing except presence. The traveler looked at Elias. "These are beautiful." The old clockmaker rested his hands on his knees. The stars have always loved ordinary happiness. The boat continued toward the center of the lake. There, the water became brighter, not because of the moon. Something beneath the surface was glowing, slowly, steadily. The traveler leaned over the side. Far below, they could see hundreds of tiny clocks. They rested upon the sandy bottom, perfectly still. Their faces reflected moonlight through the crystal-clear water. None of them moved, none of them ticked, yet they seemed wonderfully peaceful. "What are they?" the traveler asked. Elias looked into the water with familiar affection. "They are the clocks that have finished counting." The traveler frowned gently. "Finished?" The old clockmaker nodded. "Every clock measures moments for a time, but eventually, some are invited here, not because they are broken, because they have faithfully completed their work." The traveler watched the quiet clocks resting beneath the lake. They looked neither forgotten nor abandoned. They looked content. One particularly old clock rested beneath a patch of waving watergrass. Its wooden frame had softened with age. Tiny fish swam peacefully around it. As the traveler watched, a small beam of moonlight reached the old clock's glass. For just a heartbeat, its hands moved, only once, not forward, not backward, simply meeting together at the very top, then becoming still again. The traveler felt an unexpected sense of peace. Elias noticed. "Some moments," he said softly, "do not need to last forever. They only need to be fully lived." The boat drifted onward. The floating stars gathered around it in quiet company. The little pocket watch chimed once. Its cover opened gently. This time, instead of a memory, the traveler saw something new. a quiet workshop, warm lantern light, a wooden bench. An older version of themselves, carefully repairing a small clock while smiling peacefully. The image lingered, then slowly faded. The traveler looked up. What was that? Elias's eyes twinkled in the moonlight. Perhaps, he whispered, it wasn't a memory. The breeze grew wonderfully still. Far ahead, at the very center of the lake, a small island emerged from the silver mist. Upon it stood a single tree. Its branches were bare, yet each branch held dozens of tiny glass clocks. None measured hours. Each glowed with the soft light of the moon. The boat quietly turned toward the island, as though it had known the way. All along, the little wooden boat drifted toward the island without making a sound. The water remained as smooth as polished glass. The floating stars followed quietly behind, not leading, not chasing, simply keeping gentle company. As the boat touched the shore, the traveler stepped carefully onto the soft, white sand. It felt warm beneath their feet, though the moon still ruled the sky. The silver pocket watch rested comfortably in their hand. Its ticking had become so gentle that it seemed less like the sound of a clock and more like the slow breathing of someone peacefully asleep. Tick, rest, tick, rest. Elias stepped ashore beside them. He smiled toward the tree waiting at the center of the island. There it is. The traveler looked upward. The tree was unlike any they had ever seen. Its trunk was broad and smooth. Its bark shimmered softly with shades of pale silver and warm gold. Its branches stretched gracefully toward the heavens. Instead of leaves, hundreds of delicate glass clocks hung from every limb. Some were round, others oval. A few resembled tiny stars. Some were no larger than a walnut, others the size of a dinner plate. Moonlight passed through their crystal faces, casting gentle circles of light upon the ground below. The clocks made no ticking sound. Instead, they gave off something even softer, a peaceful humming, barely louder than the breeze moving through distant grass. The traveler whispered, "They're beautiful." Elias nodded. "This is the tree of gentle hours." The traveler walked slowly beneath its branches. Every glass clock reflected a different shade of moonlight. Some glowed with cool silver, others with pale blue. A few carried the warm golden light of late summer evenings. One tiny clock caught the traveler's attention. Inside its crystal face, instead of numbers, were tiny painted clouds drifting lazily across a blue sky. "What time does this one tell?" Elias smiled. "It tells afternoon naps." The traveler laughed softly. The old clockmaker chuckled too. Not every hour needs numbers. They continued walking. Another clock held tiny painted snowflakes that floated endlessly behind the glass. "What about this one?" "It measures peaceful winter evenings." The traveler smiled. A third clock contained a tiny sailing boat crossing a calm sea beneath a full moon. "And that one?" Elias looked at it fondly. "It reminds people to watch sunsets whenever they can." The traveler stopped beneath the center of the tree. "So none of these measure minutes?" The old clockmaker shook his head. "They measure moments worth remembering." The breeze stirred gently. The glass clocks chimed together, not loudly, only enough to sound like distant wind bells floating across the valley. The melody drifted through the quiet night. Soft, slow, comforting. The traveler closed their eyes. For a few peaceful breaths, they simply listened. When they opened them again, they noticed something curious. Every clock hanging from the tree had only one hand. Not two, just one, moving very slowly, almost too slowly to notice. The traveler looked at Elias. "Why is there only one hand?" The old clockmaker reached up carefully and touched a nearby glass clock. It glowed warmly beneath his fingertips. "Because peaceful moments never worry about being early. or late. He smiled. They only ask to be fully noticed. The words settled gently into the evening. The traveler found themselves taking a slower breath. They hadn't realized how quickly they had been breathing before. The little pocket watch suddenly became warm. Its silver cover opened quietly. This time, instead of showing a memory, it showed a single empty chair beside a fireplace. A knitted blanket folded neatly across its arm, a steaming cup of tea resting nearby. Snow falling gently beyond the window. The chair waited peacefully, not lonely, simply ready for someone to sit. The image faded. The traveler smiled without knowing why. Elias watched kindly. "Sometimes," he said, "our hearts remember places we've never visited." High above, one of the glass clocks loosened from its branch. It drifted gently downward, not falling, floating, like a feather carried by the gentlest breeze. The traveler instinctively reached out. The little clock settled softly into their hands. It was surprisingly light. Its crystal felt cool, comforting. Inside, there were no numbers, only a tiny golden moon slowly circling a field of stars. The single hand moved almost imperceptibly. The traveler whispered, "It's beautiful." Elias nodded. "It has chosen you." The traveler looked surprised. "Chosen me?" The old clockmaker smiled. "Every visitor leaves the island with one gentle hour." The traveler looked down at the tiny glass clock. "What do I do with it?" Elias answered softly. "You don't carry it. You remember it." The little clock dissolved into countless threads of silver moonlight. The light drifted gently into the traveler's heart. There was no flash, no great miracle, only a quiet feeling, as though one peaceful evening had found a permanent home inside them. The pocket watch chimed once, warmly, gratefully. The tree of gentle hours shimmered. Its branches swayed without wind, almost as though the old tree itself was smiling. Far beyond the island, the moon had begun its slow descent toward the western hills. Night was growing deeper, calmer. The floating stars gathered once more around the waiting boat. Elias looked toward the quiet shoreline. "There is one last place to visit." The traveler followed his gaze. Beyond the island, where the lake met the silver mist, stood a small bridge of white stone. It seemed to begin nowhere and disappear into the moonlight. The old clockmaker smiled. "That bridge," he whispered, "only appears to those who are no longer afraid of taking their time." The traveler held the little silver pocket watch close. Its ticking was now perfectly matched to the peaceful rhythm of their own heart. The little wooden boat rested quietly against the island shore. The floating stars lingered upon the lake. Their reflections shimmered gently, as though the water itself had become another sky. Elias stepped onto the white sand. The traveler followed, holding the silver pocket watch close to their heart. Its ticking had become so soft that it no longer sounded like the passing of time. It sounded like belonging. Tick, rest, tick, rest. Ahead of them, the white stone bridge stretched into the silver mist. Its graceful arches seemed to float just above the surface of the lake. There were no railings, no lanterns, no signs. Only smooth stone warmed by countless peaceful moonlit nights. The traveler looked toward the far end. "I can't see where it goes." Elias smiled. "Neither can I." The traveler blinked in surprise. "You've crossed it before, many times, and you still don't know." The old clockmaker chuckled softly. "The bridge never takes you where you expect. It takes you where your heart has become quiet enough to arrive." The traveler stood silently for a moment, then took the first step. The stone felt pleasantly warm beneath their boots. The second step, the third. Each footfall made no sound. Instead, tiny circles of silver light spread gently beneath their feet. Like moonlight resting upon calm water, the lake remained perfectly still. The floating stars drifted alongside the bridge, almost as if escorting them. The breeze carried the fragrance of lavender and cedar once again, the familiar scents of the workshop. The traveler smiled. "It smells like home." Elias nodded. "Peace often does." They walked slowly. There was no need to hurry. The bridge seemed to lengthen with every gentle step, offering as much time as anyone might need. Above them, the moon hung full and bright. Below, its reflection smiled back from the quiet lake. For a while, nothing happened. And somehow, that felt like the most beautiful thing of all. The traveler realized that their thoughts had become wonderfully quiet. The long list of things they once believed they needed to remember had gently drifted away. Tomorrow's questions no longer asked for answers. Yesterday's worries had softened into distant echoes. Only this moment remained. One slow breath, then another. The silver pocket watch gave a single, peaceful chime. Its cover opened of its own accord. This time, there were no pictures inside. Only a perfectly still moon reflected upon calm water. The traveler looked at Elias. "It isn't showing me anything." The old clockmaker smiled. "Oh, I believe it is." The traveler looked again. The moon remained still. The water remained still. There was nothing else. Then they understood. For the first time since beginning their journey, there was no memory pulling them backward. No future calling them forward. Only the quiet gift of now. The watch had finally remembered its true purpose. Not to measure life, but to gently remind its keeper, to be present for it. The traveler closed the little watch with a grateful smile. It was never broken. Elias shook his head. No, it was simply waiting for someone to slow down enough to hear what it had been saying all along. The bridge continued beneath the moon. Far ahead, the silver mist slowly began to part. A warm amber glow appeared in the distance. Soft, steady, comforting. The traveler squinted. "Is that?" Elias smiled before the question was finished. "The workshop." The traveler looked surprised. "But we walked so far." The old clockmaker's eyes twinkled. "Peace has a curious way of bringing us home." As they drew closer, the familiar little stone workshop came into view. Its windows glowed with warm lantern light. Lavender swayed gently beside the front path. The tiny stream whispered over smooth stones. Everything looked exactly as they had left it. And yet, everything felt different. Not because the workshop had changed, because the traveler had. The bridge ended quietly at the edge of the garden. As soon as they stepped onto the grass, they turned to look back. The white stone bridge was gone. Only the calm lake remained, silver beneath the moon. The traveler smiled. "I almost think I imagined it." Elias opened the workshop door. The comforting chorus of clocks welcomed them home. Tick, pause, tick, pause. The old clockmaker hung his blue coat beside the door, then gently accepted the silver pocket watch from the traveler. He held it beneath the lantern's warm glow. The ticking was no longer merely accurate. It was peaceful. It no longer counted the hours with urgency. It kept company with them. Elias nodded with quiet satisfaction. "There." He placed the watch back into the traveler's hands. "It remembers." The traveler slipped it carefully into their pocket. For the first time in many years, they did not wonder what time it was. They simply felt grateful to be exactly where they were. Outside, the moon continued its slow journey across the quiet valley. Inside, one crystal bottle upon the highest shelf shimmered a little brighter than all the others. It had quietly collected something more precious than moonlight. It had collected a peaceful heart. The workshop welcomed the night once more. Its windows glowed softly against the quiet hills. Inside, the hundreds of clocks continued their peaceful chorus. Tick, pause, tick, pause. Each clock kept its own gentle rhythm. None hurried the others. None tried to be louder. Together, they created a quiet harmony. The traveler stood near the doorway for a long while. Everything looked familiar. The polished wooden shelves, the brass tools resting neatly upon the workbench, the cabinet filled with crystal bottles of moonlight, the warm lantern hanging above the table. Nothing had changed. Yet every ordinary thing now seemed extraordinary. The traveler smiled. It feels different. Elias poured 2 cups of warm chamomile tea. He handed one to the traveler. It isn't the workshop. He settled into his old wooden chair. It's the way you're seeing it. The traveler wrapped both hands around the warm cup. Steam rose slowly into the evening air. The fragrance of chamomile mixed with cedar wood and lavender drifting through the open window. For several peaceful moments, they simply sat together. No conversation, only quiet company. Sometimes, that is the kindest gift 2 people can share. The silver pocket watch rested upon the table between them. Its polished surface reflected the lantern's gentle glow. Without warning, it gave a single, cheerful chime. Then another. Soon, several nearby clocks answered, not loudly, softly, like distant friends greeting one another across a quiet valley. The traveler looked around. They're talking. Elias smiled over the rim of his teacup. In their own way, he placed the cup carefully upon its saucer. Every clock in this workshop has crossed paths with another. They remember. The traveler listened carefully. The chiming wasn't random. It rose and fell with a gentle rhythm, almost like a lullaby. One small clock would chime. A larger grandfather clock answered with a deeper note. Then a tiny brass travel clock offered a bright, delicate reply. The melody drifted through the room, warm, comforting, patient. The traveler closed their eyes. The music carried no words, yet somehow it spoke of home, of rainy evenings by the fire, of shared meals around wooden tables, of stories told beneath warm blankets while the wind whispered outside. When the final note faded, the workshop became wonderfully still once again. Elias stood. "I have something I'd like to show you." He walked toward the tallest grandfather clock in the room. It stood in the far corner beside the largest window. Its polished walnut case reached nearly to the ceiling. Unlike the others, it had no numbers upon its face, only a circle of tiny golden stars. The traveler had noticed it before, but somehow their eyes had always wandered elsewhere. "What does this one measure?" Elias rested his hand gently against its smooth wood. "It measures the quiet hour." The traveler tilted their head. "I've never heard of that. Most people haven't." The old clockmaker opened the tall wooden door. Inside, instead of heavy brass weights, hung a single crystal pendulum. Moonlight passed through it, scattering soft silver patterns across the floor. The pendulum moved slowly, gracefully, almost hypnotically, back and forth, not counting seconds, inviting calm. Elias smiled. Every night, for one peaceful hour, the world becomes just a little quieter. The traveler listened. Outside, even the breeze seemed to pause. The leaves of the cedar trees barely moved. The stream behind the workshop flowed almost silently. The valley itself seemed to breathe more gently. "When does it happen?" the traveler whispered. The old clockmaker looked toward the moon. "It happens whenever someone chooses peace instead of hurry." The traveler smiled. "So it isn't the same time every night?" Elias laughed softly. "No. The quiet hour belongs to whoever needs it most." The words settled gently into the warm room. The silver pocket watch chimed once. Its cover opened. Inside, the traveler saw no memories, no future, only a peaceful reflection of the workshop, the lantern, the tea, the old clockmaker smiling kindly. The image remained longer than any before. The traveler realized something. This, too, would become one of the beautiful moments that bloomed in the garden. One day, somewhere, someone might pause, share tea with a friend, or simply sit quietly beside another person, and a new flower would gently open beneath the moon. The thought filled the traveler with quiet joy. Elias closed the grandfather clock. The crystal pendulum continued its slow, graceful dance. Outside, the moon had begun descending toward the western hills. Its silver light grew softer, warmer, almost golden. The crystal bottles upon the shelves shimmered together, one by one, as though they had all begun listening to the same peaceful song. The old clockmaker looked toward the window. His voice became almost a whisper. "Tomorrow night," he said, "the valley will celebrate." The traveler looked up. "A celebration?" Elias nodded. "The night of the first moon. It only comes once each year. What happens?" The old clockmaker's eyes sparkled with quiet delight. "Everyone brings their oldest clock. They don't come to repair them. They come," he smiled warmly, "to remember the moments those clocks have quietly witnessed." Outside, far across the hills, a tiny bell rang. Soft, clear, welcoming. The traveler felt a gentle excitement, not the hurried excitement of rushing towards something new, but the peaceful anticipation of knowing that tomorrow would offer another beautiful moment worth noticing. The next evening arrived without hurry. Morning had unfolded into afternoon. Afternoon had gently welcomed twilight. And now, the first star quietly appeared above the hills. The valley seemed to know. Windows glowed with warm candlelight. Garden gates opened softly. Lanterns were hung beside doorways. The fragrance of fresh bread, cinnamon, and apple blossoms drifted lazily through the cool evening air. It was the night of the first moon. The traveler stood beside the workshop window, watching the valley awaken in a different way. No one rushed along the cobblestone paths. Neighbors greeted one another with unhurried smiles. Children carried tiny lanterns, no brighter than fireflies. Older couples walked arm in arm. Even the village dogs seemed content to stroll rather than run. The traveler smiled. It feels as though the whole valley has slowed down. Elias adjusted the collar of his well-worn blue coat. It always does. He picked up his small lantern from the hook beside the door. Some celebrations ask people to make noise. He smiled gently. This one asks them to notice. Together, they stepped outside. The evening sky shimmered in deep shades of sapphire. The full moon rose slowly above the distant hills. Its silver light spread across rooftops, gardens, and winding paths. The valley glowed softly, as though every home had borrowed a little moonlight for the night. People gathered in the village square, not in crowded circles, but in little groups, leaving plenty of room for silence between conversations. In the center of the square stood a great oak tree. Its branches stretched wide above smooth stone benches. From every branch hung tiny glass lanterns. Each held a single silver flame. They swayed gently in the evening breeze. Their light was soft enough that the stars remained the brightest lights in the sky. The traveler looked around. Everyone carried a clock. A grandmother held a small brass mantel clock, wrapped carefully in a knitted shawl. A young baker carried a flour-dusted kitchen clock with painted blue flowers around its face. A shepherd brought an old wooden clock carved by his grandfather decades before. Even a little girl proudly carried a tiny alarm clock with one missing bell. The traveler leaned toward Elias. "Why bring old clocks?" The old clockmaker smiled. "Because old clocks remember quietly." The village gathered beneath the great oak. No speeches were given. No music began. Instead, the oldest woman in the valley stepped forward. She carried a tiny silver key tied with a faded blue ribbon. She placed it gently into the lock of her old clock. One slow turn, click. The clock chimed once. Clear, gentle, peaceful. Silence followed. Then she smiled. "When this clock first rang," she said softly, "my husband asked if I would walk home with him after the harvest festival." She laughed quietly. "I've been walking beside him ever since. A warm ripple of smiles passed through the gathered neighbors. No applause, only quiet happiness. Then another villager stepped forward, an elderly fisherman. He held a weathered pocket watch, whose silver had become smooth with time. This watch belonged to my father. He opened its cover. It stopped the morning he taught me how to row across the lake. He smiled toward the moonlit hills. I never repaired it. I didn't want that morning to end. The traveler noticed tears glistening in a few gentle eyes. Not tears of sadness, the kind that sometimes arrive when gratitude quietly fills the heart. One by one, the villagers shared. A teacher remembered her first day in the little schoolhouse. A carpenter spoke of the afternoon. His daughter had handed him a wooden toy she had carved herself. A young mother smiled as she recalled the tiny kitchen timer that rang just as her newborn opened sleepy eyes for the first time. Every story was simple. No grand adventures, no great victories, only lives lovingly lived. The traveler looked down at the silver pocket watch resting in their hand. For the first time, they understood. A clock was never important because it measured hours. It became precious because it quietly witnessed them. Elias stepped forward at last. The square grew wonderfully still. He held no grand clock, only a small crystal bottle. The very first bottle of moonlight he had ever collected. Its silver glow had softened with age, yet it remained beautifully warm. He uncorked it. A single thread of moonlight drifted gently upward. Instead of disappearing, it divided into countless tiny lights. Each one floated through the square. One settled upon every clock. For a brief, breathtaking moment, all the clocks glowed together. Not brightly, just enough to remind everyone of the beautiful moments they had quietly kept. The little girl hugged her tiny alarm clock. The fisherman smiled at his old pocket watch. The baker rested a gentle hand upon the painted kitchen clock. No words were spoken. None were needed. The traveler felt the silver pocket watch grow warm once more. Its cover opened silently. Inside, there was only one image: the workshop, a warm cup of tea, moonlight through an open window, and Elias smiling as he asked, "How has your day been?" The traveler closed the watch with a grateful heart. That question, they realized, had changed everything. The moon climbed higher. The glass lanterns hanging from the great oak shimmered gently. One by one, the villagers began walking home. Not because the celebration had ended, because they wished to carry its quiet peace with them. Soon, only Elias and the traveler remained beneath the old tree. The old clockmaker looked toward the moon, then toward the hills beyond the valley. "There is one final place," he whispered. "The oldest place of all." The traveler smiled softly. "I thought we had seen everything." Elias chuckled. "So did I, the first time I came." Beyond the village, where the hills met the horizon, a narrow path of pale stone appeared beneath the moonlight. It wound gently upward, toward a place where even the stars seemed to pause. The village grew quiet once more. Lanterns glowed gently behind cottage windows. The fragrance of fresh bread faded into the cool night air. One by one, the villagers returned home, not carrying anything new, only noticing what had always been there: a familiar chair beside the fire, the comforting sound of a kettle beginning to sing, the quiet breathing of someone already asleep beneath a warm blanket. Simple things, beautiful things. The traveler walked beside Elias along the pale stone path leading beyond the valley. Neither hurried. The silver pocket watch rested peacefully inside the traveler's coat. Its gentle ticking matched the rhythm of their footsteps. Tick, step, tick, step. The path climbed gradually through peaceful hills covered with lavender and wild thyme. Moonlight rested upon every flower. The breeze carried their soft fragrance across the hillside. Above, the stars watched patiently, as though they had witnessed this same quiet journey for countless generations. After a long while, the path reached a gentle hilltop. There stood a single stone bench, nothing more, no tower, no temple, no grand monument, only an old wooden bench beneath a wide oak tree. Its branches stretched gracefully toward the moon. The traveler looked around. This is the oldest place. Elias smiled. It is. The traveler looked puzzled. But there's nothing here. The old clockmaker sat upon the bench. He rested both hands upon his walking stick. Stay a while, Strakuma. The traveler sat beside him. The oak leaves whispered softly overhead. The valley shimmered below like a sea of tiny lanterns. Far away, the workshop window still glowed with warm amber light. The little stream reflected the moon like a ribbon of silver silk. Everything was wonderfully still. For several peaceful minutes, they simply watched. No words, no questions, only breathing, only listening. The traveler noticed something curious. The longer they sat, the slower the world seemed to become. The breeze softened. The stars appeared brighter. Even the moon seemed content to linger. Then, the silver pocket watch gave one final, gentle chime. Its cover slowly opened. Inside, there were no gears, no numbers, no memories, only a tiny mirror. The traveler looked into it. They expected to see their own face. Instead, they saw the valley, the workshop, the lake, the garden of lost moments, the tree of gentle hours, the white stone bridge, the villages beneath the great oak, every peaceful place they had visited. Then, very slowly, the reflection changed once more. Now it showed someone else, a child, many years from now, walking slowly toward the little workshop at sunset, curious, hopeful, carrying an old clock wrapped carefully in a blue cloth. The child knocked gently upon the familiar wooden door. 3 quiet taps, tap, tap, tap. The door opened. Inside stood an older traveler. Their hair now carried threads of silver. Their smile was calm, kind, patient. The traveler blinked. It was themselves. Not exactly the same. A little older, a little wiser. The child asked quietly, "I've heard there's someone here who can repair almost anything." The older traveler smiled. "I can certainly try." The image faded. The pocket watch closed. Softly, click. The traveler looked at Elias. Their voice was barely above a whisper. Was that the future? The old clockmaker smiled. It was one possibility. He looked out across the sleeping valley, the kind that grows when a person learns to treasure quiet moments. The traveler sat very still. The idea did not frighten them. It filled them with peace. Perhaps every journey, when walked gently enough, eventually becomes a welcome for someone else's. The moon drifted higher. The oak leaves rustled quietly overhead. Far below, one by one, the lights in the cottages went out. Not because darkness had arrived, because sleep had. Elias stood slowly. He stretched comfortably, then smiled toward the stars. "I think it's time," the traveler nodded. "For what?" The old clockmaker looked kindly at them. "To stop measuring this evening," he offered his hand. "Let's simply remember it." Together, they walked back toward the workshop. The path seemed shorter now, familiar, comforting. The little stream welcomed them with its quiet song. Lavender bowed gently in the breeze. The warm lantern still glowed beside the workshop door. Before stepping inside, Elias turned toward the moon. He lifted the final crystal bottle of the evening. It was empty, or so it seemed. He uncorked it. Instead of moonlight entering, a tiny thread of silver light floated outward. It rose slowly into the night sky, joining the countless stars above. The traveler watched in wonder. What was that? Elias smiled. The evening. He placed the empty bottle back upon its shelf. No night is ever truly gone. It simply becomes part of the light that guides another. Inside, the clocks continued their gentle chorus. Tick, pause, tick, pause. The traveler placed the silver pocket watch upon the workbench. It no longer needed repairing. It had never truly needed repairing at all. It had only needed someone willing to slow down enough to hear what it had been quietly saying. Outside, the moon began its gentle descent toward morning. The stars kept faithful watch. The valley slept peacefully beneath soft blankets of silver light. And if, on some quiet evening, you ever find yourself setting aside your worries for just a little while, if you pause to notice the fragrance of rain, the warmth of a cup of tea, the comfort of a familiar chair, or the peaceful sound of someone breathing nearby, perhaps, without realizing it, you have already visited the little workshop. Perhaps you have already crossed the white stone bridge. Perhaps one tiny flower has quietly bloomed in the garden of lost moments, simply because you chose to notice this moment instead of rushing toward the next. So now, allow your thoughts to become lighter, like moonlight resting upon still water. Let every unfinished task wait patiently for tomorrow. Let every busy hour quietly close its eyes. The clocks will continue their gentle song. The stars will keep their faithful watch. And somewhere, in a little workshop hidden among peaceful hills, Elias will open the windows to welcome the evening, light his small golden lantern, listen kindly to every quiet clock, and whisper, "How has your day been?" Tonight, your only answer can be a slow breath, a peaceful heart, and the quiet comfort of knowing that this moment is enough. Sleep well, dream gently, and may every beautiful hour find its way home to you.